Death doesn't take anything from you. It simply reveals the truth you've been running from your whole life. Have you ever lived your whole life without ever truly feeling alive? My name is Sienna Caldwell, just an ordinary woman, 52 years old, single mom, night shift nurse. Not famous, not special, and honestly, there's not much remarkable to say about my life. Except for one thing. I died. And in dying, I learned more than I ever had in 52 years of living. I remember the day clearly. Nothing seemed unusual. No signs that the doorway between two worlds was about to open. I just felt tired, a lingering fever. I assumed it was just exhaustion, which made sense after 12 hours of cooking, laundry, calming my grandson, and then rushing off to work at the hospital. But the next morning, I couldn't lift myself out of bed. A deep, cold spread from my bones outward, like something inside me was slowly shutting down. I called for an ambulance. On the way to the hospital, I was still thinking, it's fine, probably just the flu. But when the doctor glanced at my charts and froze, I saw something shift in his eyes, quick and fearful. What was running through my veins wasn't just blood, it was poison, sepsis, silent, swift, and deadly. As I began to slip under, the sound of the machines pressed in, beep, beep, beep. I heard it more clearly than ever, not with my ears, but with my awareness. Every sound echoed from some distant place. I couldn't move, but I could feel everything. My body was growing cold, starting from my feet. My head was spinning. And the thing that frightened me most wasn't death itself, it was the emptiness that came before it. I found myself wondering, if I disappeared right now, would anyone even notice? It wasn't some abstract philosophical question. It was a real, aching pain. I had cared for hundreds of patients. I had listened to hundreds of final words, but I had never once imagined that my last question would be, does anyone still need me? I used to be strong, the one in control, the one who kept it all together. But in that moment, I was just a child, waiting alone after school with no one coming to take me home. A soul so tired, I wasn't sure I had a reason left to keep fighting. And then I heard it. A voice. Not from a doctor, not from a monitor, but from somewhere deeper than my body. Let go, Sienna. It wasn't a command. It wasn't comforting either. It was more like a truth I had always known but tried to forget. I tried to hold on. But to what exactly? Pain? Loneliness? Fear? The moment I asked that question, everything fell silent. There was no bright light, no swirling wind, no drama like in the movies, just space. A silence so vast it quieted even my thoughts. And within that silence, something began to take shape. Light, not loud, but certain, like a door opening. Not a door to escape the world, but one leading inward. I didn't know it yet, but what was waiting on the other side wasn't death. It was the greatest truth my soul would ever hear, and it would forever change how I lived the rest of my life. I used to think death came with screaming, flashing red lights, hospital beds, and electric shocks pounding through the chest. But for me, death arrived like a whisper so soft I almost didn't notice I had already left. One moment, I could still hear the doctor calling my name, machines beeping louder and louder. Next, I was standing in the corner of the room, looking down at myself. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't panicked. There was only stillness, complete and profound. My body lay there, pale and small, covered in wires, but I no longer belonged to it. I was drifting. I didn't float upward in the way people describe. There were no wings, no magical beams of light. I just wasn't bound by gravity anymore. I moved through the ceiling, down the hospital hallway, and beyond anything time could measure. Everything felt slow, yet somehow incredibly fast. I knew I was no longer tied to the physical world. But what overwhelmed me most wasn't the freedom. It was the weightlessness and emotional lightness I had never known. There was no pain, no fear, no voice in my head screaming, "You're not enough." Everything was quiet. And in that silence, I felt, maybe for the first time in decades, held. Not by arms, but by light. The light wasn't blinding. It was soft, like sunrise, and it soaked into every part of my soul. And when it reached what I can only describe as the non-physical heart of me, I broke into tears, not with water, but with awareness. I had spent my life chasing love in men, in my children, in my job, in accomplishments. But now I knew love had never been something outside of me. It had always been here. I had simply forgotten how to feel it.
Then I saw a gate. It had no distinct shape, no frame I could define, but I knew it was a gate. There was no guard, no force demanding I enter, but I felt I needed to step through. And the moment I did, everything changed. I entered a space without color, without boundaries, and yet it was full of meaning. The air felt like music, not something to be heard, but something to be felt. I was no longer Sienna. I was everything. And at the same time, I was nothing. I didn't remember who I had blamed. I didn't remember sorrow or hurt or anger. The only thing left was presence. And then something appeared, not with a defined shape, but with a presence. No gender, no face, but the light from it was as warm as a mother's embrace, as vast as the night sky, and as peaceful as a lullaby from 1,000 lifetimes ago. I didn't hear the words, but I understood, as if we were having a conversation, soul to soul. You have traveled far. You have endured much pain, but you have never been abandoned. I trembled. I had no mouth, but I responded with a thought, I'm not worthy. And that presence poured into me a feeling so powerful, I nearly dissolved into it. You don't have to be worthy. You only have to remember. And I did. I remembered everything, as if every question that had ever haunted me about God, about life, about purpose, already had its answer. Not written in any book, but already within me. Then I was taken further, beyond anything I believed a soul could reach, and in that place I saw the full truth about the past, about why I came to Earth, and about the sacred force that connects us all. I used to think I was a person, body, a past, a medical file, and a handful of scars no one could see. But in that place, when the light surrounded me, when I dissolved into that presence, I realized I was not Sienna. I was a soul, ancient. I had been here before. I had loved. I had failed. I had chosen to return. No one told me this. I remembered it. as if the truth had never left me, only been buried beneath the dust of the world. I was guided through what felt like a corridor of light. With each step, memories unfolded like pages of a book, not just from this life, but from many before. I saw myself as a man who lost his wife to war, a child abandoned in an orphanage, an old blind woman whose voice once moved an entire village to tears, and all of them were me. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel fear. I only felt gratitude. Every hurt I had carried, every loss I had once cursed, now revealed itself as notes in the song of my soul. Then I saw my mother, not in form, but in frequency. Her soul appeared not as the cold, distant woman who remained silent when I cried, but as a fragile spirit, full of fear. I saw the terror in her eyes as a little girl. I saw how the cycle of wounding had begun long before I was born. And I understood. No one came into my life to hurt me. They only did what they could with the pain they hadn't yet healed. I wept not from anger, but from clarity. For the first time, I truly saw her. My mother was also a wandering soul, also carrying wounds. And now, as I looked at her through the eyes of my soul, there was no resentment left. Only love. I was shown something. The people who came into my life were never random. They were soul contracts I had agreed to before I was born. Some came to uplift me. Some came to hurt me, to teach me how to grow. No one was extra. No one was out of place. And the moment I understood that, I let go. I forgave them. I forgave myself. I forgave the years I spent not knowing I was worthy of love. The light grew stronger. I saw the entire earth like a giant sphere of energy where every soul was playing a role, like actors on a stage. All of us were trying to remember who we are, why we came here, and how deeply we've always been connected. And then a message came through, not in words, but in frequency. You are part of the whole, and you have never been separate. I didn't need to understand it with my mind. I knew it with my soul's heart. I was light. I was part of love itself. And I didn't need to become someone to be loved. I only needed to return to who I truly am. But the journey wasn't over. Just as I reached that truth, I was asked a question, the simplest and yet hardest question I had ever faced. Do you want to go back? Do you want to go back? The question had no punctuation, no distinct voice, but it echoed through me like a bell struck deep within the soul. There was no pressure, no condition, and yet it couldn't be avoided. I was still. Here, in this place, every question that had once haunted me had already been answered. Here, there was no fear, no loneliness, no judgment, no burden to carry, no expectations to meet. Here, I was everything. And everything was me. I thought about the life I'd left behind, the small, cramped room where I curled up alone every night, the endless, draining night shifts, the silent tears I cried because my daughter hadn't called in 3 weeks. I remembered the times I laughed with coworkers while feeling empty inside. My heart whispered, "Stay. This is home." But then I saw her, my daughter, when she was 4. Her face lit up as she hugged my neck after her first day of school. I saw memories I thought I had lost. The way she stood at the door crying after being teased, only wanting me to hold her. I heard her laughter. I heard her calling, "Mama." And then I heard the words she never actually said, but that I had longed to hear my whole life. "Mom, I'm sorry for making you sad." I trembled. My soul wavered like a candle in the wind. And in the middle of that endless light, a single thread, thin as silk, pulled me gently back toward the world. Not through duty, but through unfinished love. You may stay, the light said, or you may return. There is no right or wrong choice, but if you return, bring back what you have remembered. I wasn't sure I was strong enough. I wasn't sure that body could keep going. I wasn't sure the people I loved were still waiting. But I knew that if I could carry even a flicker of this light back to just one person, then maybe my life hadn't been lived in vain. I took a breath, not with lungs, but as a soul about to dive into a freezing ocean. And I whispered in the silence of my being, I choose to return. Immediately, the light contracted. I felt a pull, a gravity drawing me back. My body, so strange, heavy, and cold, was calling me home. I didn't want to go back into it, not out of fear, but because after becoming light, squeezing back into a physical form felt like shock. Re-entering my body was like forcing myself into a shirt that no longer fit. I opened my eyes. White lights. The sound of a ventilator. A doctor's voice. She's awake. The pounding in my chest was real. This time it was my human heartbeat. It hurt. Every cell in my body hurts. But it wasn't the pain of ending. It was the pain of a seed breaking through the soil after a long winter. They said I survived miraculously. They said at one point my heart had stopped for nearly 2 minutes. They couldn't explain why I came back or how I came back so clear, so awake. But they didn't need to understand.
Because I knew I didn't just survive. I returned. And returning is never the easy part. Carrying the memory of light into a world filled with shadows is a burden not every soul is ready to bear. But then I realized the hardest part is not dying. The hardest part is coming back to life as someone entirely new. I came back to life, but I was no longer the woman I used to be. My body was still Sienna, with the same scars on my arms, the same graying hair, the same eyes worn out from too many sleepless nights. But inside me, there was a radiant stillness, as if I had brought back a piece of light from the other side, and now I had to learn how to carry it in a world that had grown comfortable with the dark. For the first 3 weeks after waking up, I barely spoke to anyone, not because I was traumatized, but because everything around me felt foreign. I didn't feel anger toward the rude nurse. I didn't feel frustrated when the doctor didn't explain enough. I didn't feel hurt when my daughter stopped by for only 10 minutes before rushing off to work. I didn't feel anything except one thing: compassion. I felt compassion for every person straining under invisible weight without even realizing it. I saw it in every anxious face, every rushed word, every tear swallowed in silence. Because I had been them. And now I saw them as light that hadn't yet remembered how to shine. I started to write, not to publish, but to remember, to hold on to every detail of that journey. Each word was a thread connecting me to the light I once dissolved into. I wrote about what I had seen, about the lessons I was given, about the truth no one teaches in school, no textbook ever mentions, that love is our essence, not a reward, that we don't need to become worthy to be loved, we only need to be ourselves. I began sharing my story with old friends. Some backed away, thinking I'd lost my mind, but others went silent. They didn't ask questions. They just looked at me for a long time and then cried. One said, "I died once too, but I've never told anyone." Another whispered, "I was planning to end it all, but your story makes me want to live one more day." I began to meet people in pain. Not to heal them, I'm not a soul doctor. I simply sat with them, held their hand, and told them about the light I encountered, about the nameless presence, about love that asks for nothing. And many times, I saw their eyes change, like a candle inside them had just been lit. I began changing the smallest things. I looked at my daughter with new eyes, not hoping she would understand me, just feeling grateful she was still here. I forgave my mother, not because she apologized, but because I no longer needed to hold the pain. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in years, I didn't search for flaws, didn't sigh, didn't blame myself. I simply whispered, "Welcome home." Living after death isn't about living more gloriously. It's about living more slowly, more deeply, more gently. It's learning to see others as souls in roles, not enemies. It's accepting pain as a teacher, not a punishment. It's loving without needing to be loved back. I no longer seek the light. I've become the light. And if you ask me, how do I know what you're saying is real? I won't try to convince you, because light doesn't need to be believed. It only needs to be felt. And if you've read this far, I believe it's already beginning to touch you. I died to learn how to live, and now all I hope is that you don't have to face death to finally start living the truth.